Women and young girls at the time, we were nothing. In a way, we were nothing, right? I mean, we just like consider as a piece of, it can be equivalent to a piece of furniture or whatever. My older sister was given away to my distant uncle, and that was part of the culture.
Right.
In big family, they share your offspring, for the purpose of labor, right? And so my sister was given away when she was very young, and she's 4 years older than I am. And so she was given away, but I was the only one that was sold by price, for $100 at the time was a lot of money.
Yeah.
When you're in that kind of situation, 5 years old, and you say, okay, I don't know who these people are. I don't know what's going to happen to me. I could die or I can live, right? I mean, it's very easy. There's water well all over the places. I can jump in and drown myself and die, and my life would be done, right? Or, I go, wait a minute, I'm too curious about all this, so I want to live. So how do you live, right? And, one would say when you're 5 years old, you're so young, how would you determine that? I can't explain to you. So I have always kind of, I think when I was 5, I decided I was going to live. And if I was going to live, I'm going to have to create some kind of defense mechanism. So I created a bubble. I called it the bubble. So I insulate myself inside of this bubble. And that's why I was kind of creative in writing, because then within a bubble, I can dream a lot.
Hi, I'm Sharon Landon, and welcome to my show, Old Asian Lady. Today, my guest is Nancy Chen Baldwin. She is the managing director of My Trading Partners, and she is an author of a newly published book called 1,000 Layers of Water and Clouds, a tale of a Taiwanese daughter. Thank you, Nancy, for coming by to speak to me today.
Well, thank you for having me. Thank you so much for having me. Yeah.
So you wrote this book. It was published last year.
Yes,
right?
September 2023, yes.
Right. So was there motivation for you to write this book?
Well, the book was kind of in doing, I worked on this book from journaling about maybe a dozen years ago,
Okay.
And then it just became very clear as I, started age, when I was 73, I'm going, wait a minute here, there's a big change in life. And when I relocated sort of part-time to Taiwan, and it was through a kind of, a personal crisis at the time that I was so determined that I was going to publish this book, because it's almost like a chronicle of my life, and so I just felt like it was a legacy that at least I can leave for my family and my future generations. It's kind of somewhat of egotistic thinking, but I think it was really a gift that I want to give them. So
a gift of your story.
Yes.
Right.
And sort of re-baseline, the family history. We are small. The Baldwin is a very, very small family. And, we don't really have a lot of history, because of my situation. And so I just felt like there was a need for me to kind of set a foundation for the future generation and knowing where they came from, especially, my children are mixed race, right? My husband's a Caucasian American, and I'm Taiwanese. So they sort of need to know what I came about and be, I think I would like to have them to be able to treasure their heritage, so.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of, my brother is telling me that his daughter is writing a lot about family history and stuff like that, and I'm supposed to send her some information, and they're Caucasian. But just the fact that people can have something to hold on to and to know about their history, I think is really valuable.
Right,
So-
right. And then I think as I progress through the journey, and I tell people, I mean, this book is working for a dozen of years, and so there's different version of it. And it was kind of more like a healing process for me too, because if you look at the very first version that I wrote to where I have today, you will see the progression that was made in terms of forgiveness,
okay.
less anger, less hurt. And then, so it kind of show you the healing process. And as a result of it, I also, developed quite a lot of a self-compassion and through the forgiveness of other people around in the past, I found that the story is no longer about me, and just, I think very recent years, in Taiwan, I met quite a few people, and it really dawned on me that, my gosh, my experiences are shared by many, many young girls and young women, either in my time or even today in the world. Even today in the world, women are still suffering, and from the same experience. So the book kind of became sort of my Bible in such a way that I think would be a good way to motivate people, to inspire people in a way that give them hope, that you don't have to be a dumpster and then just stay there. You can really get out of it and see the sunshine again, and you can really empower yourself to get wherever you want to get to. And so,
yeah, everybody's journey, is a little bit different, and I think, like you mentioned, that once you write a book or write things down, that you kind of release a lot of things that might maybe have kept inside. You get to know yourself a little bit better in relationship to all the things that have happened to you. So now that we've all said that, so can you tell us a little bit about how your story started?
Okay, so my story started in 1950, right? So I was born in 1950 in a very small village in Laomei, which is a Shimen district in northern part of Taiwan. It's about, I don't know, maybe 10 miles away from Taipei. And I was a farm girl, and I was born to a couple who were farmers. And I know I was born in a farm because my birth mother, when I found her again 6 years ago, I actually revisited where I was born in a room. Of course, it's shack now, because all these years. And so we work in a farm, and then what I remember, it's a journey that you kind of freeze, like I feel like I'm thawing now by talking to you and by talking to a lot of people. I'm thawing out a lot of myself. And what I could remember was, my father wanted to come down to the city because in 1955, or just before that, and as you know, 1949, the war was over. The Japanese went home, the Kuomintang came in, Americans troop moving to Taiwan to help protect Taiwan. So there's a lot of transition going on. So a lot of people from the farm in the mountains and rural area, they all come into the city because the building boom. They can get better wages, they can work and stuff. So my father was one of them, but his pride says, well, I'm not going to work in construction, I'm going to sell. I'm going to be an entrepreneur. So I want to sell produce because the farm association. So he borrowed money from my grandmother on my maternal side, my mother's side, to come to the city to set up a little business by selling fruits and vegetables, just like the way he was. That was the way to market, Unfortunately, he didn't make enough money to do that. And then my brother, my mother was pregnant with my younger brother, the next brother. I was the number two, but anyway, the brother. And so we sort of stay in a construction sites that I call the tent city. If you read a book, there's a big section about tent city, about how that was. But unfortunately, what happened was the money was borrowed. My mother came from a pretty wealthy landowner family. She was the only daughter, and her family owned all the land, which my parents and my father's family leased the land from. And so marrying a poor farmer, of course, at that time wasn't the right thing to do. So my grandmother was
Probably
very
still
angry.
isn't now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so anyway, so when my brother was born, in a city, in a tent city, and my grandmother decided that was the opportunity to say, get rid of her. So she sold me to another Taiwanese woman when I was 5 years old. So when my brother was 2 and I was 5. Yeah.
Okay, so she sold you to pay to
For
get
the
back
debt.
for the debt, and
Supposedly the debt that my father borrowed from her. But I think during that time, I was very, very angry. How could a grandmother who was wealthy, not that I was an extra mouth to feed or there's no money or we just taichung, but by selling me where they had the money and the only daughter, and so I was always kind of in the beginning for many, many years, I was very bitter and very angry. But then I understood, women and young girls at the time, we were nothing. In a way, we were nothing, right? I mean, we just consider us a piece of, it can be equivalent to a piece of furniture or whatever. My older sister was given away to my distant uncle, and that was part of the culture.
Right.
In a big family, they share your offspring, for the purpose of labor, right? And so my sister was given away when she was very young, and she's 4 years older than I am. And so she was given away, but I was the only one that was sold by price, for $100 at the time was a lot of money.
yeah, that was
In
1955,
55.
$100, right? And so, did you know that you were being sold?
No, it was, it was a bittersweet time alive, my life. The sweetness was I was the only child of my parents for 3 years, first 3 years of my life,
Right, because your sister got.
And I never knew that I had a sister, right? I never knew that I had a sister.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I was the only child for 3 years, the first 3 years of my life. And then, I was cherished by my father. I mean, my mother was I couldn't really remember her a lot, just cold, distant, I think. And maybe that was a way women, powerless women felt at the time. No voice, But I remember, I was cherished by my father. And, he gave me a really, really wonderful, enchanting name of Sui Yun, which is the water and clouds. And I guess that's where
It's in your book, right?
1,000 layers, water and cloud. And that's a very, very special name. But of course, when I was younger, I never really connected what that really meant until much later in the recent years that I really appreciated, what that name really meant. So I was cherished by my father, and so I had this romantic, picture of my father being somebody who's caring, protectors, and all these wonderful things, No, I never knew that I was gonna be given away. All I could remember, the next thing I can remember was that I was dressing up in this beautiful red woven suit, and that's always the picture of that little girl, jet black hair, with a little gold earrings sticking on, with a little French beret hat, and with this beautiful wool suit because it was still, it's spring, but it was cold, and then black patent shoes. And I remember I was in this big house in Taipei, in 中山北路，在中山国小那边。And in this big, huge house. And it was supposed to be a friend of my adopted mother's friend. And that's where I was in, and I was so happy, my God, I'm in this big house, I have new clothes, wow, and I felt very special. But then the moment came was, I remember seeing something, some kind of red envelope, and that was so vivid, but it was just blushing across my eyes. And then the next moment I know was my father gave me a big hug, and my mother didn't do anything. I don't remember hugging my mother. And they walked out a big door and never looked back.
Wow.
Yeah.
So this lady that bought you, how did you get to know her? Or Or what happened after?
I mean, I didn't know her much. It was this strange house, strange people I never met before. And then my parents left. And I think this was the most critical moment that I think just blocked me for the rest of my life for a long, long time. And I'm just kind of getting out of it, and that abandonment. But I just remember this beautiful woman. She was beautiful, and I didn't know who she was. And so she held my hand, I don't remember, and took me out. But then I ended up with another woman in another apartment. So, I mean, that was really cloudy period of my time. It's like I was passing on, like, from one house to the other, and in the beginning, I never really understood what was going on. So I think at that moment, I froze. I just cut out all emotion because that was the best defense mechanism I had because I didn't know what was going on. And that buried for, all these years. And then I never really lived with my adopted mother. I only see her during New Year's, Chinese New Year time when we go visit her mother in Taiwan, in the country. And then maybe I'll see her 2-3 times a year. And, they never, even though they bought me as her, I call it chambermaid, that's the name I gave myself, chambermaid, is to take care of her for the rest of her life. I mean, that's why she bought me, because she couldn't have any children. But I never knew her profession at that time until much later, when I went to school and I'm kind of getting things together here and put things together. That's how I found out that she was a bar girl. And she was a service. I prefer to call her as a service girl. We Westerner would call that as prostitution. But I don't equate that because prostitute to me is an overnight stuff. But living with American GI for a period of time as a substitute wife, that's another terminology I introduced to myself. I mean, it's a little bit different, right?
Right.
So that's how she was able to earn U.S. dollars. She made a lot of money with the U.S. dollar. So it wasn't until I was, I guess, was 7. So 2 years I was passing on to one family to the other, supposedly her friends, and then after that was with my aunt, which is her adopted sister, and I stayed with her pretty much actually for a year, which was the longest time so far, after 2 years of passing her around. And then after that, I was able to go to elementary school because the Kuomintang at the time has this policy where children are supposed to go to elementary school, get a primary education. So I guess I was lucky because generally most of the kids in my time don't go to school, especially if you're from the mountains and farms, right?
Right. And a girl too.
And
right?
girls too.
Yeah.
And so the policy really, I was lucky because the policy was enacted, so everybody has to go to school. Even though, I'm sure that some of them still didn't. But I was lucky I went because, frankly, way I saw it, in recent years was the Chen family who adopted me really weren't prepared to have a child, to be in a family at a time. And they really didn't know what to do with me. Because when my adopted mother adopted me, her 2 younger brothers were married then. So they had to take care of themselves too. So one time, she rented a little room to put me in, and of course that's that's another traumatic moment in my life that I blocked it out for years and years. And, you'll read it in the book about the room,
So how long did it, I can imagine that it was a very traumatic thing because even now, after this many years, it affects you so much. And I just kind of, when you're talking about chambermaid, it was just a little bit reminding me of something that my adopted mother had said to me, because I was adopted, my brother and I were adopted, And when I had a conversation with her, not too long ago, for the first time about adoption, she was telling me that, they were concerned about us because they thought that my mother had died, and there were 8 of us kids. My older sister had been married already. But the fact that because of our financial status, maybe that we might be sold off as servants or something like that. And I had never thought anything about it. And I was thinking, was that a normal thing at the time? Because my father was also, he was in the U.S. Navy, and he was based here in Taiwan. I mean, a few years after your situation, but definitely there was a big U.S. presence here. And then I had spoken to my sisters after I had reconnected with them, and, they never got sold off, or they never got, they were kept in the family and stuff. So I was just wondering where that idea from their mind came from, that they were in such a thing to help out.
Yeah.
With,
it's kind of interesting, and I think maybe that's what I'm going to be doing with the second book I'm writing about my adopted mother, Grace. And I think that's part of the research that I want to do based on what you said, because I'm sure that girls were sold, with money and all that stuff. But I'm not too sure if they were sold outside the country or not. I mean, at that time, I don't believe that adoption, and that's the other area on the research, is the 1950 in Taiwan, how the adoption policy worked. I know I heard a story about rich family, they would go to the hospital and snatch the infant as soon as they were born. So I mean, that takes place, and whether or not money transaction take place or not, well, I'm sure that there's some,
right.
But I think in my case was like, it's so I don't even know the words to use. The fact that 6 years ago I received almost like a so-called official piece of, they call it adoption paper.
Oh.
And and then it has a condition attached to that, which was like, wow, and it has my birth parents' name, it has my adopted parents' name, it has my birthday, my birth name.
Okay, so you didn't know any of this
until
prior
6 years ago.
Wow, amazing.
Because my adopted mother prevented me to have any contact with my birth family all these years. And then she passed away about 10 years ago. And when we came here before COVID, 6 years ago, and I guess my uncle, his youngest brother, who she was very close to, decided that was time for me to, if I wanted to. So it was offered to me, and it was like amazing that it was a piece of paper that was legally stamped by the government that it took place. And the good news was my name stayed Australian. The Water and Cloud stayed. It's only the last name changed from Plight to Chen. And then there's a condition. The condition, which was really interesting, and I did not pay any attention to it until recent year. And the condition said, my birth father, he dictated that I was to receive education. That was part of the deal, that he would agree me to be sold to my adopted mother, is that I have an opportunity to receive education. In return, my adopted mother would have the right to decide whether or not I would get married at all, and if I do, who I would marry to, and she would have the sole decision making. Yeah.
Right. So that would have been given away by what normally would have been your father's responsibility. But I feel like the fact that he had that condition in terms of making sure that you had an education, I think that speaks a lot.
Yes.
For what his
yes. And that's why I and only the recent years, that I it's almost like a breakthrough where I tried, and then I was able to connect my name with a piece of paper.
Yeah.
Now my father somehow, I don't know, a farmer, a poor farmer in Lao Mei, how will my father ever thought about giving me this worldly name Australian? It's the sky and the ocean, that's the whole universe.
Yeah.
And that he want to be sure that I had received education.
Yeah, because
Isn't that
name,
amazing?
yeah, it is, and and I feel like names in you know, Chinese or Chinese names, or in China or in Asia, are much more important with meaning than they are in the States or in Western countries and stuff.
Yes.
So yeah, how long did it take you to get used to being with your new family then? Was it?
I don't know if I will get used to it. I think that, it's like, it's a matter of survival, right? I mean, I said that many, many times before. When you're in that kind of situation, 5 years old, and you say, okay, I don't know who these people are. I don't know what's going to happen to me. I could die or I can live, right? I mean, it's very easy. There's water well all over the places. I can jump in and drown myself and die, and my life would be done, right? Or, I go, wait a minute, I'm too curious about all this, so I want to live. So how do you live, right? And, one would say, when you're 5 years old, you're so young, how would you determine that? I can't explain to you. So I have always kind of, I think when I was 5, I decided I was going to live. And if I was going to live, I'm going to have to create some kind of defense mechanism. So I created this bubble. I called it the bubble. So I insulate myself inside of this bubble. And that's why I was kind of creative in writing, because then within a bubble, I can dream a lot. I can imagine the world in a different way. I look at people, I would make up story about them. I'll go to the market, or I walk down the street, I would make up story about them, and I would write. And so when I was very, very young, I write very short stories.
Do you have them still, or have you ever kept them?
Unfortunately, I went back to my school, my elementary school, tried to retrieve, but they don't keep them. So unfortunately, so it's all in my mind.
Right.
And I would write poetry, very short poetry about that. So that was that. So I'm kind of blocked out the outside world until my grandmother, my adopted grandmother, the blind grandmother, which you read in a book I read. I wrote quite a lot about her. And that's kind of where my spirituality came in, is that, she was pretty, how do I want to call it? She was a Buddhist. It's a folk religion. Taiwanese Buddhism consists of many, many different elements, right? And so I would call it a folk religion, but she was very devoted Buddhist. And of course, that comes with the superstitions about things, right? That we would call, Western would call, oh my God, how could that be? That's superstitious. But that's how they live in a farm. And in Taoyuan, in Guishan, in Taoyuan area at that time, everything is all rice farming.
Right.
And so she was the village spiritual leader. So I would spend summer, when a school vacation came. Now I spend the summer and a winter vacation during Chinese New Year. I would be sent to my grandmother to spend with her, and with the mind in mind that I was going to help her, because she was blind and she was by herself. And my mother, my adopted mother, provided money to hire somebody to help her, but she always gave her money away. So anyway, that's their story. And I was always curious about how did this blind woman with this robe, gong gong nian jin, gong gong nian jin, and there's all these people coming to pray in her little teeny house and teeny temple. I was always curious about that, right? And then I think it was 8 years old, I was starting to go. So it's between 8 and 14 years old. That 6 years period of time, I would go to her farmhouse during the school vacations. And I would help her, and then, so I met all the farmers. And I think that's where I started to establish a little bit of my ego formation.
Okay, so what was the deepest impression then you have of your grandmother?
My grandmother was my world. So every time I talk to my grandmother, I would talk about her. And maybe some of them is a romantic notion, how that goes, when you're a child and you have nothing, you are very impressionable. And I always thought of my grandmother was like, oh my God, she is this supreme being, she is here to purify her last stage of earthly life, and she's actually going to go to the land of enchantment, in her belief,
How old was she at that time?
When she passed away when she was 85. So 85 seems to be the number. Yeah. But I wasn't here, and I was very, very sad that nobody told me about her passing, and I was very angry about that. But of course, they probably didn't realize how close I was with her. So I think my grandmother, she taught me, and the farm life was very, very comfortable. And the farmers, the women from the community always come. They take turn to come and help her clean the house, cooking, or whatever. But I would remember I had chores. Every morning. I would get up and try to find duck eggs or chicken egg, the eggs in a courtyard, and then I would be the one who would have to help her, to be sure that cook all the food. And then she had 2 pigs in the back of the courtyard, and that was my job. I would have to go and she cooked, or the women cooked this food for the pig, and I had to carry it, my little girl carry it to the back, and I would have to feed the pigs.
Yeah. Oh, is this something that you enjoyed, or you just, thinking about it now, it looks like you're kind
no,
you're not really
when I think about it, at that time was like, oh God, smells, because of pool. And then
Right.
And then my job was to clean the toilet in the back,
okay.
Oh my God, that was a horrible job. But I did the most pleasure things to do was chasing after the chicken and chasing after the duck so I can get the eggs.
Yeah,
that was
kind of like the prize. You get the prize or something.
Right. So, I have a lot of good memories, with my grandmother, doing fun things, but of course it was really scary, Don't go to the pond over there. There's the ghost, evil spirit down there. If you get closer, she's going to drag you in and you'll never see the sky again,
It's kind of like the Western, the ghosts under the bed type of story.
Yeah, it's kind of a sarcastic way of loving, I want to keep you safe, but I'm going to scare the heck out of you kind of thing.
Right, you behave. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And, so I bonded with her, and she taught me a lot about her belief in a way. And then, I came out with this motto that I have. It's always been, and I'm living with that now. I write it down, is you love deeply, you give freely, and you just be whoever you want to be. And that was from my grandmother.
Yeah.
You love deeply, meaning you love whatever you do. Don't question it. You just love, go for the gusto. Never question it. You just go for it. And do it the best you can, and then go for it. And give freely is you give whatever you can, whatever you have, and never ask anything for return, because that's not what you're here for,
Well, it's interesting because I feel like in a way that's more Western type of thinking a lot, and that your grandmother being in a very much older culture and in Chinese culture would come up with that.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think is that and that's why I think I value her so much of her vision from a spirituality perspective from my grandmother. But I also experienced a lot of emotional neglect, in a way that I felt like, I was always silenced. I was always silenced because of my mother's profession. I was never allowed to have friends over. And so I had really very rare to have friends in my school, in elementary school, or the 2.5 years I was in Chuzhong middle school. So I was always alone. And again, the bubble and the dream, kind of carried me through that. So I think it kind of helped me quite a lot to develop my intellect, dealing with situations, but the emotional neglect that being able to get in touch with somebody emotionally, the feeling portion of it, I think was really absent for the first, I would say maybe not as much as 14 years, because I did have good time with my father, when I was young. Yeah, so I think that set pretty much in a foundation for not a bittersweetness, the sweetness of learning a lot about life so early in a young stage. But bitterness, of course, is that the lack of emotional support.
Yeah. So how did you end up in the States then?
Okay, so that's the second book that I'll be writing about Grace. Was my adopted mother, when she was a little girl, she was beautiful. I could picture her, just beautiful woman, goddess, I call her. She met an American GI who was here stationed for just 6 months, and he was a code decoder, so during the wars he was decoding Japanese codes in Yangmingshan. And my mother, I guess, met him and fell in love with him, maybe. I don't know if that's appropriate terminology for our Taiwanese relationship, but maybe it is. I don't know. That's what I'll do.
Love does funny things. So
yeah. And so he was 9 years younger than my mother, and so of course he was so young. So he left. They were in love supposedly, and then he left go back to the United States, and they were corresponding with each other for many years. For many years. And so she decided that she wasn't going to get abandoned. So in a way, she was the woman before her time, very progressive. And so she found a really old merchant marine guy in Keelung. Kaohsiung, merchant marine. And then she got him to marry her.
Okay, so that was not love.
I don't think
Probably
so.
not,
And adopted me legally.
Okay.
So that would enable me to go with her to the United States, of course, to take care of her, old age, right? So that's how we got to the United States. And we had to go there before my 14th birthday, because at the time, the American immigration law is that if you go there before your 14th birthday, you automatically will get a green card. You don't have to wait.
Oh. Yeah, because I think after, I wasn't 14, but after we were adopted and I got my passport, and we got naturalized citizenship.
No, I had to wait for 7 years.
No,
I had to wait for 7 years to get naturalized.
Okay, so maybe it's just the timing, because you were a few years ahead of.
Yeah, during that time, the policy was that before 14. And so that's why the rush. And then so I never received my middle school diploma because she took me out of the school the last semester. And so I never completed in the Taiwan school system. And then we went to the United States when just right before 14 years old. Yeah.
Well, how was that? Because you were taken out of middle school to go to the States. Did you know any English at the time? I mean, you weren't around.
Well, in the middle school, we had the fundamentals, right? I mean, so English, the Kuomintang at the time is also, pushing for English as a second language for us, Taiwanese. And so the school curriculum is that you got to learn, but it's mostly grammar, ABCD, grammar, and very simple sentences. Conversational English was not. So, I learned how to read a little bit. But conversational English was not. My mother put me in a so-called conversational English school for 1 month. You can't learn anything for 1 month. But, so much pressure, right? So when we went, I had 3 dictionaries. I carried 3 dictionaries. Well, at that time it was 2, and then I bought another. My English, my ESL teacher gave me the 3rd one. So I have an English, Chinese to English dictionary that I had here that I took with me. And then when I went to the United States, my ESL teacher gave me the English to English. So I carry those 3 dictionaries mostly in my high school year.
All right, so you went straight into junior high school or high school when you were there?
I was there. I was lucky because, and thank God to the to the Taiwanese educational system, the mathematics and the science, all those classes, they were like way above, in the American system. So everything I learned in the middle school, they're just going through in high school.
Oh, yeah.
So I passed those courses like flying colors,
Right. I guess mathematics and stuff, you don't have to have necessarily a language. It's just numbers, a lot of numbers.
Just number, right. Okay. So I was able to pass all those exams, and of course English was a little bit more difficult, but they did not. So that's why I was able to go to high school right away and no break. We got there in March, and I was in high school in September.
March, September, wow.
And during that period of time, of course, we were living with my adopted father's family, the Kerrs. And a grandmother, I don't know. I'm always good with grandmothers, She was so kind. And she was my first English conversational teacher. Mm-hmm. She would take me to the garden and she washed the clothes. She washed it and she would line dry them in the sun, just like what we do here, in Taiwan. And so then she would tell me, she teach me all the words, the flower, the name of the flower, and we watch a lot of television. So I learned a lot conversational English that way.
It's funny you're saying about grandmothers because I remember, I don't remember my Taiwanese grandparents, but my adopted parents, my mother's mom, Grandma Mary, I remember she lived in Boise, Idaho, and we went there, and I remember really, getting along really well with her too. So I guess it's just the nurturing, older kindness. I don't know, interesting.
I was a pretty little girl. I had a lot of spunk. Even though I said it was, I blocked everything else. So I had a lot of spunk, and I smiled a lot. And everybody just thought I was so cute. And
this exotic little Chinese.
The humor into that.
Maybe, Asian.
And so my grandmother taught me quite a lot. And then I went to high school. And like I said, I'm being blessed. No matter in whatever kind of condition and situation, somehow I always end up having a lot of good people, mentoring and took care of me in that way, So I was very, very lucky. So for once upon a time, I always thought that for my grandmother's superstition that I must have done something good, like the sound of music, right? I must have done something good. And so I always felt like I was blessed in that way because in high school, without my ESL teacher and a counselor, I would never gone to college. Mm-hmm. Because even when we were in the United States, I never really lived with my adopted mother.
Oh.
And even in the United States, I live under the same roof with her, with my adopted father's family, Mm-hmm. But she always locked herself in her room because she would never come out. And I'm always out there. I want to learn things, curious and stuff. But then once she divorced her husband a year and a half later after we went to the United States, she divorced him because the man that she was in love was already in California, which I didn't know anything about.
So she found him.
Oh, they've been communicating all this year,
right.
So
okay.
He knew. And so when that happened after divorce, and we moved out of the house, and we have our own apartment, and she was never there because she was always with him.
Oh, wow.
Right. And so I had to learn quickly, how to take care of myself, Mm-hmm. So she never really gave me any allowances of money, so I had no money. So I found job,
Oh.
Yeah.
Gosh.
I found job, and like I said, I was lucky. My counselor found me the first job. I was making a nickel an hour, I guess, at that time, selling milk at a cafeteria at school.
Oh.
Yeah, that was my first job. And then a few months later, they added a job for me to work in a library at the school to shelve books in a school library. So I made some more money that way.
Was that a nickel an hour too, or was it a little?
Probably was. I couldn't remember how much that was. So I was earning that way, and then I think maybe the second year of my college, I started to make a lot of friends here and there. So I got another job working in a nutrition store with a friend of mine and an old couple, and I would clean the stores and shelving and stuff like that. So that was like 35 cents an hour.
Wow. So aside from buying you for $100, you, when you were younger, your mom, adopted mom, didn't really spend much time giving you money or taking care of you in that way.
The tragic about that, and that's why I think the second book, I think is rightfully thing for me to write about, is that toward the end of her life, I reconnected with her. I took care of her for the last 5 years of her life. And I think I came to understand her and all this healing and forgiveness and stuff. I really came to understand her quite a bit. And the tragic was that she really wanted to be a mother, but she never knew how. Because she never really had a mother of her own. My grandmother was always taking care of the farmers out there. She never really took care of her children. So my mother took over the job to take care of her brothers, And so that itself is a tragic. And I think that I'm very grateful that I have an opportunity now to really explore how that was and feeling the pain and really thaw out. I don't think my adopted mother ever had the opportunity or the know-how. Right? I got a lot of therapy, but she never really had. She just buttoned everything up.
Right. Yeah, because I think...
What a tragic, yeah.
Yeah, I think sometimes when we're looking at things in our perspective based on what we grow up with or what experience that we've had, we oftentimes don't take into consideration other people's perspectives and other people's journeys. And it sounds like your mom had a really hard journey. And, even though you were the result of her, situation in where she wasn't able to give you the love, I guess, that you had expected from a mom, that it comes from her own history.
So I really, that's why I dedicate a book to her. I really actually dedicate my book to her because of my understanding toward the end. And the other good news is, is that, we talk about faith karma. The young man that she eventually married, 2 years later, 9 years younger. They stayed together and married almost 50 years before she died. And she's, he was very loyal. I'm not too sure about love. I think in the beginning they love each other and stuff. But my mother, I think I don't like to put a label on her, but I think she has a mental health disorder because of her situation, and somewhat schizophrenic in a lot of ways about not trusting, and always locking herself in a house. And I remember her locking in the refrigerator because she did not want anybody to come in while she was sleeping to poison her food. That kind of situation.
Yeah.
And so, it was a pretty tragic. But the good news is he stayed with her all these years, toward the end. And then, he became the only father I knew, And all these 50-some years, I was a faithful daughter to him,
Did he ever adopt you?
No.
Okay.
No. So there's no, don't feel the need, but so he was part of our family. He came to New York, spent all the holidays. She came to New York in the summer to spend some time with my children. Teaches my son how to play baseball and go to the dance recital for my daughter.
This was like later on in your life.
Yeah. So, but that was, it's a bittersweet love story, but a tragic. And I think I'm going to write that second book now on that.
Yeah. So you were talking about, taking at the end of the day, you took care of your mom until she passed away. Was that something that's ingrained into you? I mean, your contract kind of said you were supposed to take care of her, but and you've been living in the States for so long, so you're very ingrained in the American way of thinking. But what was it that made you do that? Was it obligation? Was it just love? I don't know.
I think it was just a part of the process of healing that I gone through, and I think I mentioned earlier is that as I went through the whole stage of writing, is that feeling a little bit more and understanding about other people's, their lives and their traumas, But when my son was born, the connection between a child and a mother, it was so strong. And of course, I breastfed him the whole time. So that kind of developed a bond between a mother and a child. And so that's kind of got me thinking about how it was for my adopted mother, Grace, how that was for her. And I starting to feel compassion for her from the tragedy perspective, that how could I love my child so much? And how could that my grandmother did not understand how to take care of my mother, And as a result of it, she missed out all this opportunity of being loved. And the fact that she could not really connect with my children, she was always afraid to hold my children. Because she said, I'm going to drop them. I'm going to drop them. I don't know what to do. So, yeah, that sort of kind of got me to think about her situation and try to put myself in her place in a certain way. And I think by then I already worked through the anger,
So you were super independent. You had to make your own living. I mean, what did 5 cents buy you?
At that time, I could buy a pair of shoes.
For 5 cents?
Yes.
For an hour's work, you could at least buy yourself.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, but not nice shoes. I get the Woolworths, I mean, those junk shoes.
Right. Okay. But okay. Relative.
And for 35 cents, I can buy a gunny sack dress.
Wow.
From Woolworths. Yeah.
So how long did you sustain yourself? I mean, how else did your...
Almost all my life, I learned how to do that, because then what happened was I think it was between second and third year, I was 16. And I met another friend who is a Mexican-American, and her family owned a little Mexican restaurant called Amigo Friends.
Amigos, yes.
In by the San Jose bus station, and so she was always she was older, so she always had to come and open the store, the restaurant, and to get everything all set up. So she said, "Why don't you come and help me?" So she got her mother to pay me 65 cents an hour.
Moving up.
Wow. And so I started working in a restaurant, and then because I was making more money, so I gave up the other jobs because it was too much.
Right.
So I would go to a restaurant. I would work on weekends, starting Friday night, Saturday, and Sunday. And then sometimes if she needs me on Wednesday night, I would go and I help her with her math, homeworks and stuff. And so Mercy and I kind of became pretty good friends. And I started to, that's how I make my money. So I would have money to buy hygiene stuff, know, and all the clothes here and there, and the shoes here and there, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I remember in the States when we moved to Maryland that I had my first job. I think I was 14, but it wasn't because I needed to sustain myself or to do that, but I just loved being able to, have my own spending money and buying people, gifts and stuff like that. I mean, my adopted family, we weren't wealthy or anything. My dad was still in the military and stuff, but yeah, I think it would be a different thing if I had to help myself survive. But
yeah, it was. But I mean, it was hard. But on the other hand, I had a lot of fun in a restaurant. I learned how to cook wonderful Southern Mexican food. Her mother, Mercy's mother, was excellent cook, so I learned a lot from her about. I love Mexican food, so and I learned how to cook Southern style. And then, then that's where I met my first husband when I was 16 years old.
When you were 16.
Because of nearby the bus station, and he was in the army, and so he would stop by to eat, and that's where I met him. So,
Okay.
yeah, so that's another story.
So then during your time there, you were working, you were studying, and how did you see yourself at that time in terms of identity or who you are? Or did you even think about it or have time to think about it?
No, at that time, no, it was in a survival mode, right?
Yeah.
I'm having this bubble, nobody gets in, right? Until my first husband, he was the first one that kind of tried to break in. Anyway, but I don't think there was a lot of thought going into it. It's just like deal with whatever at the time I gotta deal with is to live, right? Now you gotta think, I 14, and then 16, and then 18 I graduated and I went to college, right? I mean, it was a short period of time, so there's a lot of learning of language and cultures and everything, right? No, I didn't really think a lot about it until I went to college, of course. I never thought I was any different from anybody. I had wonderful high school memories, and there's some good friends that I made, 3, 4 of them. Not until I went to college that people stopped putting label on me, right? You're Asian American.
Okay.
You're different.
Really?
Your colors, you're not white,
Well, that's interesting. Why then?
Because, in college, I mean, they have a lot of different clubs, right? They always have these foreign student clubs and stuff like that, right? And so there were a lot of the Chinese, student association, they recruiting and stuff. And I think at the time, I don't know, unconsciously or consciously, I don't know, I always try to stay away from the Chinese student. Because I feel like, well, I'm here, I'm American now, I want to be American, so I want to act like American, so I want to stay away from there. I don't want to have anything to do with them. And maybe unconsciously, it's like I didn't want to associate that with my roots.
Okay, so at that time you're American and you wanted nothing to do with being Asian at all.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
Yeah,
the funny thing is I married a Filipino American.
Well, he's kind of Asian, but he was already American, right? So
yeah, he
that's
was born
different.
in America.
Yeah.
That was a pretty confusing period. But I mean, that was that. So I stay away during college. I try to stay away. And I tried to push away my roots, my Taiwanese root, because I think it's because of that bittersweetness, feeling like, how dare you, sort of discard me, And so I left. So I'm gonna be here now. I don't want to be part of that, that kind of feeling.
Right.
So that went away. That went along for like my college years. And then until I entered the workforce, and that's when I started learning how to be active, social activism, because Vietnam War was on at the time, sit-ins and protests.
60s, right? Okay, so you were active in that?
I got to sit in and protest and march, and I lay on the railroad track with my fellow students, made of a tent to prevent the weapon being transported on a train to Oakland. Oh, yeah.
Well, was it because, because I often wonder about activism. I mean, I never really actively participated in those, but a lot of times nowadays, I hear about it, and I wonder back then, is that at the time that you did that, did you really understand the situation, and did you really believe in what you were doing, or was it just going along with the crowd?
I think it was more like going around with the crowd at the time, at that particular time. All right.
Right.
But I think when I marched with Cesar Chavez, the labor movement, when you're trying to unionize the farm workers, I think I could identify that quite a lot more because of my farming background from the farm here.
Right.
So as a result of it, I had a pretty good relationship with it. And so Cesar Chavez was, like big movement and boycotting Safeway. Safeway was the biggest grocery store, and we were boycotting lettuce and grapes. I don't know if you
Lettuce and
remember
grapes.
now. Yeah.
No.
And so I was right there. And then we marched. I marched with him, and we went to Salinas, where the grapes and lettuce, a strawberry actually. There was strawberry field when we were down there. And we would get on the bus, the students, get on the bus with them, and we would join him down there. And it was quite experience because they were spraying all the pesticides on the field. Strawberry has the highest, problem. They have the highest pesticide spray on them.
Really?
And
so it was because of pesticides. It's not because there's all these illegal immigrants working on these farms that you guys were doing.
But you see, that's the whole immigration policy, and I think that's why I became very active afterwards. Because we Americans think that, all these illegal immigrants are bad people and all this Trumps and all this media, portray them. It's absolutely not true. So I remember going down to the border a couple of times between San Diego and Tijuana. And when you walk in there, once you cross the bridge, you can see all the signs from corporate America, the agricultural corporations, recruiting for all these Mexican Americans to come to the United States to work. And in the sign said, want a good life in America? We'll sponsor you for job, right? For 2 years, and they will get them to have the work permits and all that stuff. They can bring their family, all that stuff, put them up in the shacks, charging them for money, no water, no running water, no electricity, no toilet, right? And they want so much to have a better life for their children, so they all sign and come. But the problem with it is after 2 years, the work permit is up, and they no longer need them anymore, they don't take them back to Mexico. They just leave them and say, well, you take care of yourself. And so as a result of it, you got all these so-called illegal immigrants got stuck in the United States. So we don't want to talk about those ugliness of money-making, corporate firms, right? And so I think that's why I was so committed. So injustice. There's such injustice done to these people, and so I was pretty much I actually participate in a campaign for Congressman Vic Fazio. I don't know if you know him in California. Now he was very well known in Congress in California, and I helped him to run his. I wasn't a campaign manager, but I was in his campaign because he was very pro labor movement and supportive of Cesar Chavez and all that. So I started to do that. Then I think after I graduated, just toward the end, maybe I graduated. After I graduated, then I started to join. Here I go, the Asian Pacific Women's Organization. So that's after college, I started to go back to
your Asian roots,
right? And that was because I met March Fong Yu. I don't know if you know him or not. She was the first female Secretary of State for California, but was also the first Asian woman in the state of California to be elected as a Secretary of State for many, many years.
Wow.
So I was fortunate to meet her. And so she introduced me to another organization called Women in Politics in California. And that was more of a lobbying organization. And so we raise money. We do fundraising. And so that's how I learned my fundraising skill.
Everything in life, you learn something.
And I had to get myself out of the shyness, my broken English, this heavy accent, oh my gosh, But that's when I learned quite a bit about public speaking, push myself out there to learn how to speak because I had to go raise money. And learn quite a bit about politics. So we were lobbying money to set up a child center in big corporate. We were pushing for big company to set up the child care centers on site for the mothers to come in. So we raised money on that, and then also nursing, because the nursing students were not getting a lot of assistance. So we were able to raise money to hire lobbyists for those kind of thing. And
When was this now? Was it in the 70s or 80s?
it was 72. It was in late 70s.
In the late 70s. Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
late 70s. Yeah.
All right, and you had already graduated at that time.
Yeah, and working. Yeah.
Did you ever reconnect with your real family or even your adoptive family since you've been back in
Yes,
Taiwan?
well, 6 years ago, right? So I got my birth certificate, and so my adoptive family. I was never really close to my adoptive family. I mean, both family, I have big family. On my birth side, I have 7 other brothers and sisters. On the adoptive side, I have 7 other brothers and sisters. My adoptive parents in the United States, they both have passed away. My father, my adoptive father, that I call father, never legally adopted me, he passed away 2 years ago, and I was with him the very, very last stage of his life. I took care of him, and, of course, we were very close, my mother passed away 10 years ago. So that side, we kind of settle. Emotionally and everything is settled. We are good. I was able to let go. We were in peace, and that was okay. I visit their grave every time I go to California. I bury both of them. On the birth side, I met my mother for the first time 6 years ago when I came. And during COVID, during COVID, she was ill. And so I wasn't working, I retired. So I spent quite a lot of time with her. And I was pressuring her in telling me what happened. And all I want to do is for her to say, I'm sorry.
Right.
It was difficult. She could never say that.
I think, is it because of the culture?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
they keep things.
Yes. But toward the end, I went back to the United States for some reason, and my brother called and said, Mother is her last breath, so if you want to see her, say goodbye, you gotta come back now. So I came back right away, and I guess she waited for me. And she did look at me before she died, squeezed my hands, and at that moment, I just say, okay, let go. And she did have wonderful story to tell about me and my father, all this good memory that I thought it was just a dream. But she did tell me about all that. And I think that was enough for me.
Yeah. Oh, what a story. So I just want to, I started reading your book. I'm kind of about halfway through it now. But if anybody is interested in reading more about Nancy's story, her book, 1,000 Layers of Water and Clouds, is available on Amazon.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Nancy, for coming by.
Well, thank you for having me. Thank you very much. Thank you. This was a pleasure.
Okay. So thank you for stopping by, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.